Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Housing and Settlement. Now, this semester we are of a very large class. There are 400 students in the class, of course, with the zeros, with all the zeros dropping off. So this should make for an interesting semester in this unit. Nevertheless, although there are only four of you, doesn't mean that we should think any less of this class. Now, um, while we wait for the other 20 students to show up, you can scan the QR code or make note of the number combination, so that you can pass it on to your classmates a little later on. 137678. So yeah, in this first meeting of ours, I'll talk about the definition, the function, the role, and the different typologies or the different types of housing that we have here in Indonesia. Before I dive into how we go about conducting the unit. Because as far as I'm concerned, I think up until a few days ago, we were expecting a larger number of students. So the evaluation plans, and the evaluation models that we planned for was suited for a larger audience. Now, we'll focus on making this unit this semester more of a roundtable discussion approach, much like urban management. If any of you happen to be in urban management as well. So, well, let's get it on, I suppose. First of all, I know the unit is called housing and settlement, so we'll be focused on houses. But a house is not a home. So what makes a house a home is, if you look at the formula on your screen, a home is a house plus X. There's an X factor value that make a house a home. Now, this X factor differ from one individual or one group of people to another. My X factor, your X factor could be like this statement here: home is where the Wi-Fi is, or home is where the heart is, and so on. For me, home is wherever I, my spouse, and my children are. That's home, regardless of whatever house we happen to inhabit right now. So I don't know. What do you guys? What are your X factors? Mas Abdul Aziz, what is your X factor?
Comfy, sir. Comfy.
Sorry, I can't seem to hear you.
Comfy, sir.
Can anybody else hear him? Or is it just me? Wait, just let me conduct a quick audio tech.
Comfy.
Okay, yes, sorry, I got my mixer mixed up, so should be good. Can you repeat, please, Mas Abdul Aziz, what your X factor is? Sorry,
Abdul Aziz said it's comfy.
it's comfy.
Yes.
Okay, and what is your X factor?
Mm, family.
Family, comfort, family. Um, okay, well, uh, but Amira, what is your X factor?
Uh, that's good. Hello.
Hello,
Maybe lobster.
pardon? What was that?
Lobster.
Oh, okay, okay, good. Thank you. Um, so, comfort, family, love, or warmth um, is what makes your house a home. Um, so uh, that short illustration, that quick discussion should give you an illustration of how a home has different meanings to everyone. I'm mine is family. Sorry, I have to mute you there. There you go. My home is where my family is, and uh, the house is just a structure without the other members of my family. So a home, well, actually, house, because I said I should update this. What does a house means? A house can be a financial investment, obviously, because we invest a lot of our resources into the house to make it a home, to make it as comfortable to make it comfortable for us, to make it warm for us, and warm not not only in a physical sense, but warm also in a more of an emotional sense. The home as a physical structure, home as a house, the home as a territory. This is my territory. This is my private space. This is our private space, and so on. Um, the territorial boundaries are very clear. Beyond these walls, they are my beyond these walls is my territory. Beyond those walls of yours are your territory, and so on. And should I come and visit you, then I would have to ask permission. Is it okay for me to come in? And likewise. Home as a center for self identity. Our houses, our homes reflect who we are, um, reflect our state of mind. Sometimes, a lot of the times, I think, if you look at people who struggle with hoarding issues, for example, they cram as many belongings as they can into their houses, into their homes, um, ultimately making their own lives uncomfortable. Um, it turns out that hoarding is a mental condition. So yeah, their house a hoarder's house reflects their mental condition, their mental state. So, um, but in the sense of in the sense of self-identity, if you're an outgoing person, if you love having people around, then maybe your house reflects that through the design. You might have a more open plan. Not too many walls, and not too many barriers between one space and the other inside the house. So you have a lot of space for entertaining. You like having your friends over and all that. And if you're a more closeted person, then you probably would prefer a more private configuration. A home as a social and cultural unit. Wherever we are, I think the social and cultural context of that surrounds us somehow rubs off on us and somehow influences us. And this is even more so when you're looking at a more if you're looking at a society where the extended family, where the extended community is is integral to everyday life. The word is at the tip of my tongue, but I actually forgot what it is. But much like our society, uh, where it's a pluralistic society, where it is where where no, that's not exactly right. But anyway, in a more pluralistic society, I think the home as a social and cultural unit is more evident, is more obvious than than it is in any other forms of society. I think I'll get back to that a little later on. But there are also other meanings of home. Home can be a space of care, home as a space of worship, home as inheritance, home as an investment, as a leisurely place, as a place of leisure, and home as a workplace. And these different meanings may not stand individually. Your home can be a space of care as well as a space of worship at the same time. It can be inheritance and an investment at the same time. You inherit the home from your parents, and you can look at it as an investment as well, because maybe you don't live in that place, maybe you don't live in that house, so you treat it as an investment asset. It could be a place of worship, a space of care, and and workplace as well, or as a space of leisure. Right now, with the ongoing pandemic, I think our home is a mix of everything. So some say that the home is strongly associated with the family. The family here is presented as a social institution in which exchange of informal care creates an enduring bond between family members, with ideas of security, warmth, privacy, and loving relationships. And a dwelling or house is said to be transformed into a home, in part through the exchange of informal care between co-residents. As an example, whether you live in a nuclear family where it's just you, your siblings, and your parents, or whether you live in an extended family household where you find where you live with your grandparents, or perhaps you live with your grandparents, and perhaps your uncle or your auntie still live with you, and such. So, but regardless of that, the interaction between parents and children, and between siblings, and the way they exchange care for each other, the way they look out for each other. That's what's meant by informal care. Because if you look at because in contrast to formal care is where you actually pay someone to take care of to take care of your immediate or extended family. But informal care is where we do it because they are family, they are a part of us, and because it is the right thing to do, perhaps, and so on. So home, and that is done within the house, within a home. So home as a space of care. For example, my wife and I are caring for my grandmother right now, who is an elderly, and in need of care. So our home is a space of care for my grandmother. Not only for my grandmother, of course, for my immediate family as well, but you get the idea. Home as home as a space of worship. Not necessarily the entire house converted into a space of worship, but perhaps you dedicate a small portion of your house as a space of worship. I know some of my I know when I visited my Buddhist friend's house, they have a small altar set up, so that every time they enter the house, they always pray. They always pray towards the altar. So that was in a really small unit, or really small apartment. And they still dedicated a space for that. And for Muslims, it might be dedicating a small space in their house as a prayer space, a musalla, and providing extra facilities to support the musalla. Maybe provide a little tap, or a little extension of the musalla for ablution, to cleanse yourself before you pray, and so on and so forth. So I don't know if you dedicate a space in your house for a chapel, but you get the idea. You might have a small portion of your house dedicated to your worship activities. So that activity, or that act of worship, is known as a domestic worship. It could be part of your religious practice, maybe not. So the forms of home worship is as diverse as there are religions, because we have different traditions, we have different traditions, different rituals, and different forms of practices. And that is part of our identity, I suppose, at least part of our religious identity. What sort of space do you dedicate for domestic worship is part and parcel of our religious identity. I don't really dedicate a space, especially for domestic worship. We just shuffle furniture around, and that's it. Now, the home as an inheritance. Lately, it is increasingly becoming difficult for the middle class to own a house. And so inheritance is sadly the only way that the middle class can the middle class or the younger middle class generation to enter the middle class category, and that's due in part to the houses are becoming increasingly more and more expensive and more unattainable, and perhaps even the financing and perhaps even current financing options, current leasing options are not exactly helping. So perhaps it is time for a new form of leasing or a new strategy to increase home ownership accessibility. Now, home as inheritance focuses on issues pertaining to inheritance of either an owner-occupied home or the proceeds from its sale. Um, so it doesn't have to be the home as the home that you inherit. You stay in that house. No, but home as inheritance, as I said, home as an inheritance is becoming the only way for the younger generation to enter middle class. Perhaps you, after you inherit the house, after you inherit the home, you sell the house, and you use the proceeds to, and you invest the proceeds from the sale in other forms, but in a way that helps you elevate your economic status from perhaps from lower to middle or middle to higher up, and so on. So formerly, inheritance was associated with only the very wealthy, wealth accumulation. Well, that may be true for some right now, but I guess with with aging society, with my parents' generation and perhaps your parents' generation, I think it's not always the case here. Um, so a good question is, what happens to a home on the death of its creator? Does the home cease to be a home and becomes merely a property? Well, if we look at the beginning of the session, where a home is a house plus the X factor, be it family, be it comfort, be it warmth, be it Wi-Fi. I suppose if we reflect on our own definitions of a home, then I guess once the inhabitants of a home ceases to exist, once they pass away, then I guess the house itself becomes an asset, becomes a property, and just between you and me, maintenance of these inheritance properties can be a big burden to some people. So once it becomes property, it loses all its meaning. It loses all its meaning to the previous inhabitants and to their immediate or extended family. Then I think it's just best to let go. Inheritance rights of women. That depends on the culture. That depends on the religious practices of that culture. But I think inheritance rights of women differ from one culture to another. I'm not going to go there at the moment because that's a whole different can of worms. In relation to that, the house is an investment, of course. Now, owning a home is a goal that shapes the lives and long-term savings plans of a large number of people in societies. I guess it's easy to imagine that you might have the same thoughts, that I would love to be able to buy my own house at some point. I don't want I don't want to continue to become fully dependent on my family and so on. So that could be one of your many long-term savings plan. And owning a home or home ownership is also associated with many other benefits. It is a sign of wealth. Oh, I own a house. I have a house. I have multiple houses. I'm richer than you, maybe. You have more houses than I do. You're richer than me. So, home ownership is traditionally an indicator of wealth. However, home ownership also can also mean other things. So home ownership can mean can guarantee us legal legal safety, can guarantee us a certain legal status. For example, if we reflect, if we one thing that I learned from this ongoing pandemic is that home ownership can also be an indicator of social and public health. Why? Because when the hospital beds are full, where are you going to isolate? Where are you going to isolate? Where are you going to keep yourself safe? Where are you going to keep yourself from harming other people? In your house, of course. If you have multiple houses, you can just jump from one house to another. But what happens to those people who live in informal housing arrangements? Say, for example, nakos, living in kos-kosan. That can be considered as an informal housing arrangement because the housing arrangement is between the renter and the landlord. And sometimes the agreement between the landlord and the landlord and the tenant is not exactly set on a legal document. It could be just an informal agreement. For those living in informal arrangements, such as living in kos-kosan or happen to be working in an informal arrangement as well. They may be working part-time while they're studying and so on. Now, these people are prone to homelessness. For example, again, throughout these last couple of years, throughout this ongoing pandemic, there have been multiple cases of people being evicted from their informal housing arrangements because they have been because they've been detected as they've been diagnosed with the coronavirus. Their neighbors are afraid, of course, and so they get kicked out. They get kicked out of their own home. They become homeless. Health practitioners, nurses, have been kicked out of their houses because they work with COVID patients, COVID inpatients. So it is a sad situation for those. But if you happen to own your own home, then your standing would be much firmer, would be much stronger, as your neighbors can't just evict you because this is your home, this is my house. You can't kick me out of my own house. So, home ownership as an indicator of wealth, and home ownership as an indicator of social security and public health. However, there have also been cases where access to home ownership is facilitated by the government, whether it's by the central government or by the local government, through a myriad of home ownership schemes, home ownership financing or home financing through subsidizing, of course. So, however, there are also people who um, who take advantage of the situation. They, in a way, they don't deserve such access because they already own a home. So the government subsidizes some forms of housing, and then people who don't belong to the lower income category, they come and they buy these houses and they turn them into investment property, which they should not, because it is not targeted for it is targeted for the lower income families, and to help them access housing. So I think nowadays the mechanism to screen people who are to receive these subsidies are becoming more and more elaborate, more and more complex, so as to reduce or minimize or even erase the possibilities of those not belonging to the lower income economy to access these subsidies. The home as a leisure space, well, with the ongoing pandemic, I think the majority, or maybe 99.99% of our leisure time is spent at home, and the availability of digital technologies and online leisure products. With the advent of digital technologies, I think the home will continue to be the main site for leisure practices. I do most of my shopping online, and we get most of our information online as well. Some people still read physical newspapers, but I think more and more people are switching to the electronic version as of late. We work from home. We don't need to go to the movies. We don't need to go to the theaters anymore to enjoy movies. We just have to wait a little longer, and you can have them. Through any subscription-based streaming services. And I guess with the increasing accessibility to the internet, businesses such as internet cafes are not entirely diminished, but they may take on other forms now. Traditionally, that's a strange word for internet cafes, but previously internet cafes were places where they provide the devices for their customers to access the internet. But nowadays, I think an internet cafe can be just like any other cafe, but with free wireless internet connection, and people just bring their own gadgets. These are a lot more portable than computers anyway. So I'm not so sure about the increasing level of individualization, but I think we now live in a more connected society. Although perhaps we are more connected to people who are further than who are not in the immediate vicinity. We are more connected to people who are far away. The home as a workplace. Well, I'm working from home. If you happen to be in an internship scheme, you're probably working from home as well. You might be working from home as well, but traditionally the home. But most of the time when we refer to the home as a workplace in this context, then we look at the home as a place for home-based workers, or the home as a headquarters of a home-based enterprise, industri rumah tangga, for example. They could be craftsmen. They could produce. The home-based industry can also be producing food, and I think with the current digital technology, with the sharing economy as well, these home industries are gaining more and more access, or better access, to to the market, as consumers and producers are now better connected through digital technology. Have a look at Grab or Gojek food, for example. I have discovered places where I would never have visited or even considered to visit, simply because they are inaccessible. They are inaccessible physically, so they're situated in a small alley, or they don't look too appealing, perhaps, because because of one reason or another. But nowadays, with those digital platforms, we can have a look at people's hopefully honest reviews. How many stars are they rated? If they're rated more than 4.5 stars, then okay, well, I'll give it a try. And as soon as you look at the map, oh, okay, I didn't know that place existed. So yeah, digital technology has its perks. There are, however, people again who misuse the home. This is a case, an old example of vertical public housing, or rusunawa, in West Jakarta, where the tenants use their subsidized housing as a warehouse, one as a storage facility, and the other one as a home-based enterprise. Well, I don't really know what to think about this, but if you're using government subsidized housing as a storage facility, then obviously you don't deserve access to such facilities. And if you're going to open up a stall in a government subsidized housing facility, then well, do it the right way, and not actually use the dwelling unit itself, but perhaps I don't know, open it in another place or whatever. But yeah, it's these sort of phenomenon that we continue to deal with. Some of these phenomenons may sort of bring a smile to your face and say that, oh, wow, these people are creative. We didn't think of that. We didn't think that would happen. While others, they make you wince. But of course, home-based production networks, like any other informal work arrangements, may be well, a lot of the times they are unregulated. They have unregulated working hours. They have unregulated workloads, and so on. And sometimes it can, these working arrangements with these working arrangements and the salary arrangements can can tend to become a modern day slavery scheme. But yeah, it is something that we are also working towards regulating and setting firm standards. I forgot to mention that there are also homes in temporary dwellings or shelters, emergency shelters. Temporary dwellings are um, structures where people reside temporarily, owing to circumstances that are out of the ordinary, that are out of the ordinary. So it could be because of natural disasters or man-made disasters such as war and conflict. Um,
That makes sense to me.
in in Indonesia, we have had cases where people are displaced because of social conflict or social unrest. In this case, there was social tension due to religious practices that caused the displacement of hundreds or maybe thousands of people from their homes. Simply because their neighbors think that they don't belong there because of different religious practices. We also have set up facilities for refugees from other countries. This is a photo of immigrants from Iran in Sidoarjo. But of course, temporary dwellings can also take form of kos-kosan, for example. That's a temporary dwelling. You're only living in that. You're only living there for as long as you're for as long as you're studying or for as long as you're working in some place. And there are some unpleasant circumstances where landlords try to cram as many people as possible in their homes, simply due to the fact that the demand for temporary dwelling is so high. Moving on to the housing types or building typologies. In the United States, there are different forms of American neighborhoods, single-family detached homes, and then there are also single-family attached homes where usually two structures are built together at the same time, but they cater to different families. And then we have townhouses and stacked flats. There are apartment buildings. The difference between a stacked flat and an apartment building is perhaps the number of units that they contain. And then we also have mixed-use buildings, which are becoming increasingly popular here, I think. So, excuse me. Again, from one country to another, there are different housing typologies. That was in the United States. In France, there are studio apartments, and then there are T1, 2, T3, T4, and so forth, which categorizes or indicates their spatial arrangements and the type of and the amenities or the facilities that are available, and it also denotes the minimum area covered. So, for example, a studio apartment has to at least be 9 square meters, has to cover at least 9 square meters. a T1 where the main living and the kitchen is where there's a living area and a kitchen area, at least 32 square meters. T2 living, kitchen, and separate bedroom, 45, and so on. T3 2 rooms, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Here are some forms of private and social housing. So I think that's these two are the private housing, and that's the form of social housing. And this is an example of the T1, T1, the T2, 3, and 4 categories that I mentioned earlier. So the T1, where the living arrangements or the living space and the kitchen space are. Well, I think this is supposed to illustrate. This is supposed to illustrate a wall, because of course that's the bathroom. But the living, kitchen are the living and the kitchen are sort of connected. The only thing that's separate is the bathroom. And so, what about the sleeping arrangement? Well, I suppose the sofa is a pull-out bed, which makes the living area a multifunction space. This is an example of a loft housing. Loft houses or loft houses can also be studio. Can also be take form of studio apartments, or a studio apartment can also be situated in a loft. Similar to the United States, I suppose, the detached housing, or the two family attached, and so forth. More and more other examples, and we come to the Indonesian housing types. We have detached houses, or rumah tunggal, and we have semi-detached houses, rumah koppel, 2 houses built at the same time, catering to 2 different families. They share a structure. Usually a rumah koppel or a semi-detached house share the roof structure. So the walls each house has separate walls. There is a wall separating the 2 houses, but the roof structure is connected. That's what a semi-detached house usually looks like. And then we have a row house. I'm not so sure about row houses here, but if you look at, I'm not sure if we have row houses here. Maybe in the old city, in the old city area, the kawasan Kota Tua, where where they still have a lot of European, where they have a lot of old European structures, you may still find row houses. Apartment or rumah susun, obvious vertical housing, be it luxury apartments or low income public housing structures. And then we have mixed-use buildings. The best example I can come up with is Ruko. And then we also have, I don't know, I think this is a new form. I think this is a new form of housing, condotel, where it is a combination of condominium and hotel. So I think what Pak Fendika wanted to do was give a sort of a task to document the different types of housing in Indonesia, but we're not going to do that just yet. And this is an old task anyway, so forget about that. But if you look at the national regulation, then you do have different type. You can find different types of housing. I don't quite remember the number, the regulation number, but in Indonesia we categorize houses not only according to its structure, so detached, semi-detached, row house, and everything, and all that, but we also categorize housing according to its ownership status. I'll have to share that regulation with you soon. Here are some of the references that we'll be using throughout the. These are some of the references that were cited in this in the slides. But a lot of the references that we'll be using throughout the course have been made available, and I think they are located in the relevant sections in the classroom. And so just before we end, I'd like to share this. I'd like to share this bit of information with you. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that the course structure and the evaluation tasks were designed for a larger audience, for a larger number of students. Since there are only 4 of you, 6 of us, including me and Pak Frandika, managing this course. Since there are only 6 of us, I think we might have to think about other forms of evaluation. Now, normally we would have group presentations every week, but since there are only 4 of you, that means you'll have to. If we're going to go down that road, then you might have to present multiple times. So we might consider other let's consider other forms of let's consider other options. I'm going to propose to Pak Frandika what we're doing with the urban management class, where we're compiling a booklet on urban management based on the different topics and themes, but not sure if we can if we're going to go down that road for housing and settlement as well. Let me confirm that with Frandika before letting, and I'll let you know about the outcome of our discussion, or maybe we can get together, the 6 of us. The 6 of us get together and discuss our options and how we're going to go about conducting this course over the next 16 weeks. Right. So coming back to this. I think this is all I have to share with you at the moment. I think we have one late comer. If you please, for those of you who are late to join, please scan the QR code before you, so that you can mark your attendance. Okay, I think that's it for me right now. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts that they'd like to share? Or perhaps questions? You see, I think because there are only 6 of us, it is actually better to have roundtable discussion sessions rather than having you present over and over again in a rotating manner. So I propose that we get together, the 6 of us get together and discuss this. I'm going to confirm with Pak Frandika and see when he's available to discuss this with the 6 of us, and I'll announce it through Classroom. Right. Once again, any questions or comments? Maybe not right now, but if you do have, oh, yes? I thought I heard someone unmute.
No, sir.
Okay, all good then. Right. Well, if you have any questions after class, then you know where to reach me. Other than that, take good care of yourselves, because our department has to go on a lockdown once again over the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I wish everybody well. Thank you very much for joining me this morning, and keep an eye out on Classroom for further updates. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.